Monica Nassif, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
I am delighted to be here.
Monica, can't wait to talk about your journey, your experience, and your book, I Bottled My Mother. And I love that title. Grit, Grime, and Growing a Business, the Mrs. Meyer's story. And I know your upbringing played a huge role in who you became. That's the first question I ask every one of my guests. Whereabouts did you grow up, Monica? And how did your upbringing help contribute to who you've become?
My upbringing had a lot to do with building the Mrs. Myers brand since it's named after my mother. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. I was the oldest girl of 9 kids, and honestly, I was second in command. If my mother wasn't there, I was the boss. My father was an exacting mechanical engineer for John Deere. My mother was a part-time registered nurse. And my father was very strict. Being late was 15 minutes early. And my mother was a happy-go-lucky, let's have fun, but we're going to do our work first. And she ran our house like a drill sergeant. And there was 9 kids in 10 years. So I also learned to take care of myself, meaning I learned to fight at a very early age. So it was always a scrum in our house.
When was it, Monica, that you felt an inspiration that you want to do things on your own?
My mother would probably say from the very beginning. She said, you were a child, very independent, and you always asked questions. You rarely accepted anything I told you. I was probably that kind of kid. I was also a very creative child in high school with really no outlets. I went to a large private Catholic high school that didn't have a lot of outlets for creative kids, other than I had a fabulous creative writing teacher. They always say that first teacher who sees something in you is so important. And I did. I had a teacher who was a great writing teacher. And that kind of gave me a lot of inspiration to start keeping notes, writing. And that was really the start of my creative journey, if you will.
So, where and when did you get a sense that you had an entrepreneurial spirit in you?
My parents valued work and work around the house, but more importantly, work outside the home. I probably had my first job at age 10. I was a babysitter. I knew how to take care of kids, right? And then I ran a farm crew of walking beans, soybeans, if you will. I did that at
Wow.
age 12. I had a crew of 6 girls that we spent all summer doing. And then I lied about my age to take on a very glamorous job. I was a truck stop waitress. And that's when I learned a lot about the world. My father was livid. He thought I was on the road to prostitution, that I would be working at a truck stop. But here's what the boss told me the first day. Big boulder of a man. He said, you see this pot of coffee? Someone touches you or says something inappropriate. You pour this pot of coffee in their lap and you have them see me. No one messed with us. And the cast of characters that I met to this day still makes me laugh, quite honestly. I learned a lot in that job.
Now, I wonder on the parenting side of it, Monica, if the focus that we have so much on education, and I know that the stats show a lot fewer teens get jobs, part-time jobs, even in college, a lot fewer people do. So I wonder if, in your view, that is impacting or will impact that entrepreneurship, that willingness and ability to learn from others and work with others.
That's a great question. I have 2 daughters, and our rule was when they were in high school, you either had to be in a sport or get a job. And so my oldest daughter, who was a gifted athlete, one spring said, I'm not going to go out for track. And I said, well, you have 2 weeks to get a job. She had a nitwit panic. And I said, walk up and down the streets and go find a job. 2 weeks later, she gets a job at a local Italian deli, Broder's in Minneapolis. And so she puts it on her resume when she applies for a job as a merchandiser at Williams-Sonoma. And what's the first thing they look at on her resume? Is that job at an Italian deli. So those early jobs, it wasn't an option with our girls. In fact, my second daughter went to work for a guy who has 4 kids and they're not working in high school and he doesn't know what to do with them. And he said, Cal, how did your mom make you get a job? And she goes, I didn't have a choice. I was told to get out of here and go get a job. And that's what we did with our girls. And to this day, they have very successful careers. They earn their own money. I think it's really important to really say to children, get out of here. Go stand up for yourself. And guess what? When we were young, my mom said, you get to keep all your money. And so that was huge because we came from a very modest family with 11 people. There was not a lot of money sitting around. So having your own money was huge.
Now, I wonder, Monica, in what ways did that shape your view of leadership?
My mother taught us by example. Watch and learn was really her mantra. And it was a fast paced creative hustle. My mother was very creative, but she loved working with her hands, sewing, knitting, gardening. And so every project we had around the house had to happen fast because there was only one place to experiment, and that was this tiny dining room table. And believe me, we're running a small restaurant with 11 people. So you had to learn to work really fast. And I remember thinking, this is just the way you work. So I think as a leader, I learned to work quickly, make decisions quickly. I also had a job as a secretary in the emergency room, and I saw how fast paced that was. And you had to make decisions on the fly. So what I learned about leadership was you have to lead by example. If you want to have a place that is up tempo, on the move, go fast, pass the ball without looking, this is where you want to work because we're going to have a lot of fun. We're not always going to get it right. And we didn't always get it right, but we're going to have fun. We're going to have ambitious goals and we're going to go for it. The other thing about a big family is it's highly competitive. We grew up with games and second place was for losers. So I'm not a good loser. I'm going to be honest.
That's a wonderful way to have that entrepreneurial spirit, that drive for success. Now, with Caldera, you set up a premium brand in a category that really wasn't. Beautiful scents, beautiful packaging. What got you to do that? It almost looks like you established a new category.
I saw what was happening in the whole organic and natural food. First, it was food. The consumers started migrating to organic milks, and then it was what you put on your skin. And then I thought it's only a matter of time before that same consumer seeks something more natural, safer, more of an experience for her home. So I just had this eureka moment in a store in Atlanta where I saw all these household cleaning products on this wooden pallet. And I remember turning my head going, boy, is that sad. That is such a pathetic category. What if it was great? That's what I kept saying over. What if it was fragrance and safe around your kids and your pets, and you could clean your whole home in one fragrance? It just came to me in an instant. And I got on the plane it was in Atlanta to fly home, and I wrote down on this little scrap of paper how it should go. And honestly, I just stopped sleeping. I just thought, here's this huge commodity category that is ripe for reinvention. That was really exciting to me. And I didn't know how to get into it other than to start at the premium end. And the reason I started there was because you can't defy gravity in retail. If you put your product into Walmart first, you're not going to go to Neiman Marcus second. You're going to start at the high-end retailers and work your way down. So I had worked at Target. I knew how that worked. And honestly, I didn't know how to get into the big chains, the Lowe's, the Home Depots, the Costco's of the world. So that's why I started with Caldria.
I don't necessarily think it's just in consumer goods. In almost any product you look at, whether it's been SaaS or cars, you can always move down. You can't move up in branding. But the other thing I love is focusing on being different. What was the feedback those around you were giving? Because when you seek to be different, others a lot of times say that doesn't work. If it did, someone else would be doing it. So they pull you back to the sameness of the category.
You're right on. But you know what? I didn't know anything about the category. I think ignorance was bliss in this. I really do, because probably had I been a CPG manager in Procter and Gamble, I would never have come up with this idea. Why? We don't do business like that. That's the mantra. Here's the one true way, step in line. And as you know from our previous conversation, I wasn't one to step in line. I was one to ask questions. And I approached the whole category from beauty and fashion. I was raised in the Target organization where the consumer is always right. You try to leave with fashion and trend. And I thought, no one's doing that in this category. Yet the consumer's already there. She's buying gorgeous Nespresso. She's buying French ceramic. She's buying gorgeous linens in her home. And then you've got this junk cleaning product. No, she needs something else, something more beautiful that she could sit by her sink and love the packaging. That's how I thought about it. But you're right. Some early investors thought I was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I love the point that you made. First of all, when we are in an industry, in a sector, in a business, oftentimes ideas like this don't come to us. They don't seem rational. We've seen it a certain way, we have a hard time, which is why reinvention is almost always done from someone from outside of the sector, outside of the industry. Now, the other thing that I'm wondering about again is how were you able to convince others that without specific experience in the industry, they should trust you, they should invest in you?
Well, a couple of thoughts. I had one slide in my investment deck that showed all commodity categories going up market: pet food, coffee, personal care, milk. And then the investors go, oh, I see. And then they saw the market valuation of those brands and they went, okay, I get it. But I had one heck of a time raising money, I'm going to be honest, until I met a gentleman in Minneapolis who was an early investor in the Nerf ball. And it took me forever to find this guy. Someone said, you got to find him. He's going to love this deal. He didn't love the deal, but he gave me some really great advice. So I finally find him on a Friday morning, and he sits and he listens to my entire pitch and he goes, I'm going to be honest. I hate consumer product deals. I just hate them. But you know what? I like you. So I'm going to go home. I'm going to read your plan over the weekend. And if I like it, I'll help you and I'll call you at 8 a.m. on Monday. But if I don't call you, I don't want to do this deal. He called me and he became my greatest champion and greatest advisor. And he really helped me reposition my business plan, go to the table when I was negotiating with investors. He had an investment banking background. And I think the reason he got behind me was he loved taking on the big guys. He was a rebel too. And he was really a great counselor to me.
What a powerful insight that I've seen as an angel investor and working with VC firms. You invest in the person, not
Right.
necessarily the idea. In many instances, the idea has to evolve over time. If you have the right person, if you have the right leadership team or partnership, the people that are core, they will do the right things and reinvent as necessary. So it's not the concept as much as it is the person. So he invested in you.
Yeah, he totally invested in me. However, my background was retail and marketing. You know, that I had built brands. I had a whole agency for 10 years, and prior to that, I had worked for Target. So I had seen consumer brands, the power of them, the power when they're done right, the power when you execute. And I was older. I was 43 when I started that company. I wasn't some snot-nosed 25-year-old who didn't know what they were doing. That helps too when you're an entrepreneur.
Now, what I wonder though is so you get investors, you get this started. At that point, did you want to then move down market, or that is something that came to you later?
It came to me later. I really thought when I started that I'd probably move Caldria down market. However, once we landed in about 3,000 specialty stores all over the country, I really was worried that someone else was going to take our concept of a singular fragrance across all types of cleaning products, knock us off, and go to the mass market, where 80% of all household cleaning products were sold. And that caused me many sleepless nights. I'm highly competitive, and I thought, no way, absolutely no way am I going to let someone knock us off. So let's knock off ourselves and keep Caldria at the high end. And now that actually was, I didn't think I was that smart at the time, but I realized later that Caldria became our testing ground for fragrances, products, how we should position ourselves in the marketplace to use for when we launched Mrs. Meyer's.
Monica, that is such a courageous thing to do. And believe me, I've been involved in quite a few strategic planning conversations, including an organization where I was a chief strategy officer for, where we talked consistently about cannibalizing ourselves, in
Right.
essence, which is what you did. I know it's a different brand name, different strategies, but still, to a certain extent, to investors, to key people, it's seen as you're cannibalizing yourself. It takes a lot of courage. How were you able to convince investors, your team, others that this is the right move for us?
The team saw it because we had some other smaller competitors. And we thought, hey, if we don't make a move, someone else is going to make a move. When it came to the board, I did have some very reluctant board members who were like, what? And how we did this with Mrs. Myers, you probably couldn't be done today, but at the time, Whole Foods Market wouldn't allow you to call on them in Austin. You had to go sell by store, region by region. So we started picking off all those stores. And the only way we could make it at work on shelf is we wanted all of our products together. We didn't want dish soap with dish soap window because first of all, our pricing was very much so much higher and we didn't have the dollars to advertise. So our product packaging was our billboard on shelf. So we invested in on-ground merchandisers to pick up the boxes in the back of these stores. This is exactly how beauty products did it at the time. So I ripped a page out of their operations manual and said, if they can do it, we can do it. And that worked. And the board gave us a year and a bucket of money. And if that didn't work, they said, we're going to pull the plug. And man, we hustled and we got Mrs. Myers in all the Whole Foods stores. Then we went to Target. I kicked ourselves out of Target. We can talk about that if you want. We were a little premature going there. But that's how we got Mrs. Myers started, was putting on-ground merchandisers to stock the shelves.
The other thing about Mrs. Myers is that you formed the brand concept after your mom, bottling your mother. Where and how did that idea come to you?
We had a very small team at the time, and we said to ourselves, okay, let's pretend we're the competitors. And if we wanted to take out Caldria, completely obliterate them from the market, what would we do?
Monica, I have to underline, highlight, circle that. And I think for every one of the listeners, whatever organization and team they're in, that is one of the smartest things you can do if, with real psychological safety, you are able to get contribution to that. What a powerful point that a lot of CEOs and organizations don't do and don't take seriously. So I just wanted to underline what a powerful question for you to ask your team.
But yeah, and they were all about it because when you get a team of ragtag entrepreneurs and they love to compete, magic happens. It was a lot of fun. I'm getting goosebumps now thinking back to those days. So we said, what do we stand for as individuals? We're Midwestern. We're hardworking. We believe in the concept of a healthier life. And then it was like, you know who this sounds like? Your mom. Almost 100% of our food was made from scratch. She has 7 garden plots, waste not, want not. You throw in a teaspoon what you bring home in a bushel. She was a child of the Depression, and she was not about to waste anything. And so I called my mom and said, hey, Mom, would you like to be a brand? And she goes, what's that? And so I said, I'll tell you later, but just say yes. She goes, okay. And by the way, you could come down here and help me weed the garden. You showed affection to my mother by finishing your chores, even if you're 40.
In making your mother a brand, there is a lot of opportunity and there are risks when you make someone a brand. It sounds like you tried working with her on media training as well, but that
Uh,
didn't go over too well.
oh my gosh, it was a disaster. I came out of communications, and when you prep an executive for a new product launch, you go, okay, here are the 3 key messages. She didn't have a clue how that worked. She'd go, is that a key message? Is that what I should say? But I'm going to give you an example if your readers, your listeners can take it. So we wrote during the Mrs. Myers journey, we wrote a book, a cleaning book. It was really a marketing tool to promote the brand. So we're going around New York trying to find a publisher. And we go to this big publishing house. My mother's with me. She's in the Mrs. Myers garb. We go into this meeting. There's 12 of us. There's 6 of them, 6 of us. And this editor from Texas just is loving on my mom, hugs her and goes, "Oh, Mrs. Myers, I love this brand. I'm so glad you're here." We sit down and she grabs her hand and she says, "Mrs. Myers, I got to ask you, how did you have 10 children, 9 children in 10 years?" And my mother responds, "I had a box of 48 Kotex and I never got through it in 10 years." Oh, I was mortified. I was so embarrassed. I didn't even know what to say. I literally almost started crying. I thought, so I stopped trying to control her. And you know what? She's authentic. She's real. You may not like what she says, but that was just part of it.
Monica, that's the authenticity and the humanity so many brands and so many executives today lack. In that every question that is asked, whether the response is humorous or serious, it's all so rehearsed
Yeah.
so many times that you sense it's almost like an AI is speaking in their ear and they are saying the words.
No, she was the real deal. She still is. She's 94 and still kicking. Yeah.
So your mom is the face and the embodiment of this brand. Growth is not necessarily easy, most especially in sticking to the core values of a brand. How were you able to manage that, growing while sticking to some of the core principles, beliefs, and values of the brand?
We had a brand book and it was always said, "What would Mrs. Myers do? What would Mrs. Myers say?" So whenever there was a question about this email or this marketing tactic or this product launch, we'd go back to those lists and say, would she say it like that? Can she grow it in her Iowa garden? Would she say across to the fence to a neighbor and describe it this way? So that we always went back, we always grounded ourselves in her reality. And that kept us on track from a branding standpoint. An operation standpoint is a whole nother deal. But that's how we kept on track. We tried to keep it really simple, highly focused.
From a branding standpoint, you had what would Mrs. Myers do? What were the tensions structurally and operationally as you were scaling?
Scaling was really figuring out how to distribute Mrs. Myers. You can't drop ship to the back of the store forever if you want to scale. So now we had to get rep groups and distributors. And they, of course, take several margin points. So we had to think of our cost of goods sold going forward. We had to grow up and think about our shipping and our operations and our resource management. If you go into Costco, they have a set of guidelines for how your pallet has to show up. And if it doesn't, they're going to zing you. Every major retailer works like that. So we had to grow up on the back end of our business very quickly.
So, as you did that, I'm also wondering about your own leadership, Monica, in that you had substantial experience before launching these brands. At the same time, as the brand grows, the leadership demands change. How were you able to grow in order to be the right CEO for the brand as it was growing?
What I tried to keep is true to what I was really good at. And what was I good at? Sales and marketing. And then hire around me people who are really good at operations, resource management, distribution, warehousing. That I didn't know how to do. In the early days, we were really making it up on the fly. But you can't do that anymore because you'll lose a lot of money if you don't figure out how to ship your pallets, etc. So we started to hire people with experience in that area. When we started out, this was our criteria for hiring people, and it worked every time. In the early days, we'd say, let's say we had 4 people. I'd say, okay, great. It'd be great if you could join us. Do you mind bringing your own desk? And I would just look at them straight in the face. And the corporate types would just panic. They'd be like, what, you don't have a desk for me? And I'd say, look around. We're working on card tables and old picnic tables, and maybe you probably got one at home. The adventuresome entrepreneurial types were like, okay, I got a card table. As we grew, we can't do that. So we have to have consistency on the operations side. But you can never lose the fun of the brand. the culture, the up tempo, hustle, creative hustle, and high goal setting. That's what I was good at. And then let the experts really execute on the operations side.
How were you able to maintain that culture though, Monica?
We had a very fun culture. Like we did a lot of competitive things, such as we'd have competitive pie making contests over Thanksgiving. We'd have a Christmas ornament contest. We had a talent show, and everything had prizes and games and competition. And even when we were at our largest, we had an annual talent show where there was prizes and people loved it. At first they thought I was crazy, like most things I'm doing. But I think if you just keep it light and keep your heart light and not take yourself so serious, take the work serious. Again, that was something from my mother was she operated with a light heart, but the work was very serious. So I tried to keep that as we grew. And we also had a culture of very high goal setting. I always say there's two types of goal setting, and it's really woven in your culture. You can set your goals really high, and if you miss it by a little, your team is still excited that you believed in them, that you believed enough that they could accomplish this. Or I've seen low goal cultures where they just stumble over it, and I call that kind of rocking chair management. A lot of action, but no forward motion. We were about forward motion, let's go, let's pass the ball without looking. We have goals to make.
All of that forward motion, I imagine at various times through it, you must have had opportunities to consider exiting. At what point did you start thinking seriously that it might be time? Because this is, after all, this is you. This is your
I
mother.
know. I
This is
know. It's very difficult. Actually, I knew we would exit from our very first trade show. We showed up in marketplace very differently than any cleaning products. We showed up with a gorgeous armoire, fresh flowers, beautiful products, and who's the big team that walks in on day one to have a meeting in our booth? Essie Johnson. This is an 8 by 10 booth. I don't have room for 6 people. I got to sell stuff, right? I got goals. So I had to politely ask them no sightseeing. And so I had private equity, venture capitalists, investors really crawling all over us for about 9 years. And I always ask them one question: what can you do for us that we can't do for ourselves? And I'm going to be honest, I didn't get a lot of interesting answers. Partner, whatever that means. And then S.C. Johnson, when they came calling again 9 years later, their answer was what I wanted it to be: global distribution. We can help you scale. You get to a point where you don't have the skill set or, frankly, the capital to scale. And I could see the writing on the wall in terms of more competitors were coming in. The mass brands were starting to introduce fragrance. It's getting a little more challenging. We didn't have the skill set to really scale. So you have to ask yourself, is it time? But it's a very bittersweet, difficult decision, especially when it's your mom. You have to sell your mom. Like I said, I bottled her and now I had to sell her.
Did you call your mom before to say
I
mom?
no, I called her after. I'm a chicken. I called afterwards. It was a hard phone call to make. She loved it. She loved that gig.
Now, how has life changed for you post that sale, Monica? It's part your mom, part your identity for quite a while. You have obviously written this book, so you're telling that story. In what way have things changed for you?
You know, when you're used to working in a really fast-paced hustle culture, and all of a sudden you're sitting at home staring at your laptop, it's very difficult. I'll be honest, I was kind of at sea on what to do with myself. And so I've done a lot of things. I've been an investor in small startups. I've served on boards. I got involved in a nonprofit. I did another startup that was a failure, which I'm not going to do that again. So I tried a lot of things. And then during COVID, crazy COVID times, I started writing again. And I took a film writing class, and then I wrote 3 scripts. And then I was working with a writing coach. We had the Zoom class. And she said, what are you going to do next? I said, I'm going to write a book about my mother and the business. Because as I went around and talked to entrepreneurial classes, I get the same questions. How do you do it? What should I do first? How do you think about brands? Where do you get your creative ideas? So I decided to put that in a manual, a startup manual. And then I thought, I'm going to also honor my mother, have it be a love letter to her, why she was chosen to be the brand inspiration. So that's how I merged the two ideas for this book.
A lot of powerful insights. I love the branding aspect, and I still love what I see as a strategic pivot of, in essence, undercutting yourself and then growing. It is a heck of a lot easier to say. It is a lot harder to visualize and then to sell other people on it and to do. A lot of brilliant insights on what it takes to make a business successful. So now that you're also promoting and sharing this love letter about your mom and your experience, what impact or imprint do you hope it will have on the current entrepreneurial generation?
I hope it shows potential entrepreneurs that, hey, if you have an idea big enough to disrupt a category, then make the leap. And here's how. Here's how to think about it from writing a business plan, raising money, running your finances, knowing your numbers, and most importantly, how to be a disruptive brand. Most entrepreneurs who come to see me show me this tiny little imperceptible change to a current product or service. And I say, have you been to Target? Go out to Target and walk around because you're not going to find your product there. Do you think Target's going to add a wing or give you a whole 4-foot section? They're not. So ask yourself, if I wanted to disrupt this category of goods, how would I do it? And really study that shelf. And not only the actual shelf, but the shelf in the consumer's mind. Think about their day. How can you be a part of their day? That's the other way I thought about it. How can I be a part of the consumer's day? Starbucks did it with coffee. Apple did it with personal tech. I wanted to do it with cleaning. Have it be a part of the daily ritual so you have a highly consumable business. And if you can think like that, you got a good shot at winning.
It is a powerful insights, and you positioned it as a disruptive brand and different rather than better. I love the point that you made about, in many instances, many of the business plans are a slight modification of a product that is out there, and talking about how the product we're going to introduce, the service we're going to introduce is better.
Exactly. You could go look at all the starbursts on cleaning products. 20% more suds, better cleaning power, fatter trigger. I don't care anything about that. I want something that's going to really be lovely to use in my home. And that's what I saw on this palette when I had my original eureka moment was 70% off more suds. And I went, I don't care. I want something different. I want something
Yeah,
different. When you
yeah,
said that, I thought of the saying, different is better than better.
yeah, absolutely. Now, Monica, if you were to give yourself at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey advice, what would it be?
Probably slow down. Make sure we can see your tail lights. This is what a board member often said to me. I would also tell myself, say the words. I assumed people could read my mind, could see what was spinning around in my head, and they can't. I wish I was better at that in the early days. I learned the hard way. When you're an entrepreneur and you have this vision, you just want to go as fast as you can to chase it. And sometimes I wish I would have slowed down and thought through things a little more.
What brilliant insights and advice for people to both find your book and also follow your work. Where would you send them to?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Monica Nassif. You can also go to my webpage, monicanassif.com. And the book is available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Walmart, Target, and all other major retailers.
Monica, what an outstanding book and what a great joy. As I mentioned to you, my wife has been a fan for quite a long time, fan of your mom, therefore the
Excellent.
brand. And what an outstanding way to capture some of your experience, some of your insights and send a love letter to your mom that will be of value to so many others. I bottled my mother, grit, grime, and growing a business, the Mrs. Myers story. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, Monica Nassif.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.